comes and challenges you.
Until I see it in the comments.
Yeah.
It is the truth. All right, I think I've caught my breath. I think I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, let's kick this bad boy off.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, and welcome to the Pagey Train. Today I have in the studio with me Andy Dowling from the Andy Social podcast.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
If I can get that out in one word. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's we've caught up earlier in the year, and it was this weird Zoom sort of thing that was happening, and here we are, face to face, and you got a beer here with me, and just the hospitality is just amazing.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you. I remember when COVID happened, because I had you booked in for the podcast, because you always book these things a couple of weeks in advance, sometimes months. And I'm like, because I did all my research, because we got put together by a mutual acquaintance. I think a guy that's he's photographed your band, photographed my band.
Yep.
And I've actually been in a band with Dan back in the day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. He was our drummer in Alpha Degenerate years ago.
Okay. Yeah, way back.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And he put us together, and I started looking at your content. I'm like, man, this guy is seasoned podcaster. I need to talk to this guy.
I just do it a lot, but I don't know if I do it well. But like we were saying earlier, the long game, that's been my strategy.
Yeah, just stick with it.
Yep.
I think it's like anything, though. I think maybe it comes from, because I see a relationship between that bands and filmmakers, because it can be disheartening. Being in a band can be disheartening.
Yeah.
Like, you have those glory moments, but sometimes you can get kicked in the nuts really easily.
It happens a lot, especially sort of when you're starting out, and even if you're further on down the track, I think it's just ups and downs all the time. There's no predictability to the industry or just the arts or whatever it might be, and it's just a case of, I think it's good in a way, because I think it builds resilience. I think a lot of people become quite independent and creative and strong and sort of adjust and are flexible in mind. But I think it separates sort of the people who do it for a hobby versus the people who really invest their time and want to make a profession out of it. And I think it separates them very quickly, because some people go, oh geez, this is way too much.
Yeah, you just throw in the towel, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't got to that stage yet.
Yeah. Oh, good on you.
Well, I thought, when I was like 25, being in and out of like rock bands, heavy metal bands or hard rock bands, you go, when I'm 30, I'll probably give it up,
Yeah.
Just give it away. And then, by the time I got to 29, there was no sight of doing that at all. I think that resilience comes into it. Like, I can see how being in bands and doing creative work in general, persistently, that's really transcribed into my podcasting.
Yeah.
Just stick with it.
And I think it's, especially now, more so than ever before, there's just so much noise out there, so much competition. There's so many things to, if you've just got an average person who just loves music and podcasting and all sorts of stuff, there's just so much stuff out there for them to digest. So it's like, well, how do you cut through that? And like, I've got mates of mine who still haven't bothered to listen to the podcast 5 years down the track, and they're just like, oh, I'll get around to it one day. And then every once in a while, there'll be one of my mates who'll go, oh, listen to that podcast you did a couple of years ago, just like 2 days ago or whatever. Fantastic. And I'm like, where were you 2 years ago when I put it out? Like, and then suddenly they go, oh, I wish I started listening to this earlier. And then I just sort of look at those examples and just think, man, people are busy. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff that they're trying to get through and they're interested in. Priorities are different. And so for me, it sort of gives me peace of mind going, I'm just going to put it all out there. I'm just going to keep putting episodes out and keep doing my podcast, and even with music as well, just keep putting music out. And, I'm still discovering music from the 70s, and going, oh, what's this amazing band? It's like, it was a band before I even existed. I'm like, oh, this is incredible. So I just have that sort of mentality that it doesn't have to be sort of digested straight away. It can sit there and people can discover it later on down the track. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the journey that I'm experiencing at the moment. Because, it's kind of like, when you start up a band, you tell all your friends.
Yeah.
All your bandmates will bring their girlfriends.
Yeah.
And then you might convince some of your friends to come along. Half of them will show up. They'll all give you a good pat on the back and tell you that it was awesome, regardless of its true outcome. And that usually is about it. That's the end of your crowd, unless you start advertising, unless you start promoting your music, unless you start getting out on the platforms. So I'm kind of now into that stage with the podcast where, people are, personal message out and they go, I'm so glad I found this. This is right up there, my alley.
Yep.
And I'm getting these strangers that are just finding it, people that are, further than an arm's distance away from me. And that's a buzz.
I love that. I think that's so cool. I get people just randomly just shoot me a message, and I'm trying to trace trace the link. I'm trying to work out who they know that I know, and when I can't find that immediately, that's exciting. Because I'm like, and then I start to ask some questions. Oh, where'd you hear about it? And then some people respond, some people just don't bother after that. And you're like, oh, come on, give me something to work with. Like, give me some market research. Tell me where I'm making good decisions or bad decisions. But it's cool. It just goes to show that eventually stuff gets out there and people discover it. And man, like, just every single person, that one person goes, hey man, I heard your podcast, it's awesome, or I listened to it. And I'm like, you listened to it? Like, I mean, I've known you for years, but I didn't know you listened to it. And like you would experience as well, they're just numbers. Like, you don't know. Like,
you can only surmise.
Yeah,
You don't have a microscopic look at it. You can't see it that way.
anyone could be listening.
Yeah.
Which is a bit daunting if you overthink it. You go, oh geez, like, what am I saying? Hopefully I don't say anything too crazy, but it's cool, it's exciting.
I worry about that sometimes, actually.
Yeah?
Like, yeah, because you don't want to edit your podcast.
You're on the record.
Yeah, you want it. Once you put it out there, and the zeitgeist changes. Are you changing with it, or has it changed without you? So you do worry about self-censorship and worry about those things. I worry about those things sometimes, but generally, by 2 beers into the podcast, I'm like, I don't give a fuck, man. Whatever we're talking about,
Well, I think a lot of that stuff now is I think people are looking for it as far as just really honest talk, and regardless of opinions. And I think a lot of people that aren't on the fringes of whatever that might be just want to hear somebody talking just organically, and it doesn't matter. I think people are far more forgiving than people think.
Yeah.
And people say dumb shit all the time, and I think podcast is the perfect place for this sort of this long form format where you can just have a conversation. There's no it can be structured to it. You can have some questions, but overall it's just a case of let's just talk and just see where it goes. And I think people love that. I mean, I had someone the other day, I put out an episode with a mate of mine who's a musician, and another friend of mine who I didn't know was listening, listened in and said, it was just fantastic. It was exactly what I needed. It felt like I was sitting at the pub with both of you and just listening in and being part of that conversation. And I'm like, that's what podcasting is. And so I think you can get away with.
Yeah,
it's the intention behind it.
It does have that voyeuristic charm to it, because doing media training, they teach you like you got 7 seconds to grab attention.
Ugh.
And I've learned that's
Panic.
But that's just not true. It's maybe in an advertising way that's true.
Yep.
And so people that have a full commercial interest in selling advertising space would look at it that way. But looking at it from an entertainment point of view, what is the end user getting out of it? Comments I've gotten from people, especially when they're abroad.
Yep.
I had a fan in Germany message me, and they're like, man, it's just so good to hear normal people having a sometimes outlandish conversation, but just talking about normal things, talking about things of their interest, and they'll just listen to the whole thing. And then you'll see those analytics, because when you get those messages, you go back through and you go, oh, there they are. They're listening there.
There's a few people from Germany.
Yeah. I've got a few from California. Big shout out, you guys.
Yeah, cool.
Following me on the gram.
Awesome.
Yeah, I should listen to your show. I haven't listened to your show yet. I should listen to it. Yeah. But I think that's where going into the background of YouTube or whatever your RSS platform is really valuable. Like, even though you can't see deep into it, gives you a little bit of indication. Most people don't register their gender. So those figures are usually skew-if, but all the the geo tags that you get, like 90% of my audience is obviously in Australia, but I've got 10% of my audience that's overseas. I've got them in Spain, Turkey.
Yeah, nice.
Just places, and I've got my biggest offshore audience is Ireland.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool.
I've got like 30 listeners in Ireland on Spotify.
Mad. Oh. Hello to my new Irish friends.
Yeah, sure to be sure. Big shout out to you guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're at it.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's a lot of value in that, in learning those analytics and learning, what that means. Like, I'm still learning. And by drilling into that, you can go, all right, well, why did that episode track well in that country? But at the same time, it's still throwing darts at a board and trying to make a mathematical guess out of it.
That's kind of what makes it fun as well. It's a bit of trial and error. It's a bit of experimentation to sort of go, you're not just, look, you can just have the love of just recording and having conversations with people, just chuck them out and just don't care. And a lot of people do that and they get a thrill out of just doing that alone. But it sounds like I'm similar to you. Like, I'd love to look at the data and go, okay, like maybe I can tweak things here and there to see what works, what doesn't. Oh, that doesn't quite hit, so I'll try this instead. And just little nuances, little tweaks to the system, and looking to see how people respond to it. Even just looking at where people listen to podcasts, different platforms that they're using, different browsers, all that sort of stuff. Just sort of gives me a bit of insight as far as, even if I'm sharing stuff online, what are the best links to be sharing as well? And that sort of is a big thing, because sometimes I could be sharing a link that people won't actually use to listen, and so that forces them to have to go to their normal podcast thing to search for it and then find it. And
that's right.
And those extra steps could be them getting distracted and doing something else.
That's right.
So for me, I'm like, okay, how do I get them to just one click rather than several clicks or typing in or whatever it might be? So a lot of tinkering away. I feel like I'm some mad scientist trying to work out the ingredients of some magic potion of podcasting, but it's fun. It's cool.
Yeah, no, it is fun. I was looking at for instance, like most of my YouTube audience will click on a link, but 20% of them search for it.
Yep.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah.
So that means that what that tells me is that the brand name is getting out there.
Cool.
Because then people are just typing the name of the podcast.
Perfect.
And that's what you want, because then it's on their minds and they're searching for it. So by looking at those analytics, you can see the effect of your work. Another thing I look at, for instance, you're a great example of this actually, because your artwork is fantastic.
Oh, cool.
Cheers. All of the because you've got all the cartoons and all the cartoon templates that you make, and you've done that really specific podcast. What was it? Nod to the Old School. Yeah. Where you've done all these caricatures of all these other people, which I just think is so eye grabbing, and you're just drawn to it. And when I went back through some of your older podcasts, and you can see your methodology had changed, and then I can relate to that, because I look at mine and it's the same thing. You can see it just improving and improving and improving. And by making those changes, you can look at your analytics and see if it's having a positive effect, and generally it does.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, the big thing when I started podcasting as well was, I'm shit at everything. I'm mediocre at stuff. Like, I sort of just get into something and I just try and work out what the bare minimum is to try and get things moving, and I'm not much of a perfectionist. I just don't think I've got the attention span for it, or at least that's what I tell myself. That's my excuse. But I'm always about just getting things started and then working it out later. And I think sometimes people don't take the first step because they're so worried about making sure that first step that they take is absolutely perfect. And that usually means that they'll never do it, because they're so hyper-conscious. They're worried about people's view on what they're doing and their own standards. And so for me, you go back and listen to the first, I don't know, however many episodes of the podcast. I mean, they're pretty rough around. I mean, mind you, I still think that they're rough around the edges now, but when I started, I cringe. But people go back and listen to it and they love it, because it's like, oh man, you can see how different the podcast is over the last 5 years. And it's cool, as you said, you can see some of the tweaks, some of the different images that I'm using and the different ways I'm promoting the episodes and different formats, and it's been a really big thing. And just touching on Nod to the Old School, that was a real turning point for me when it came to art and associating more imagery with the podcast, because what I do anyway, you're a bit different because you got video and everything. Hey guys. But the difference with me is that it's for the most part primarily audio, and when I did Nod to the Old School, I love that sound, by the way. It's music to my ears.
Yeah, but I like it on the podcast as well, because it's part of the blemishes, right? I like the cracks and imperfections of it. And that's what makes it perfect.
That's it. But when I did this project last year for Nod to the Old School, and basically what it is it's a 10-part podcast that promotes our last album, Fallen Idols. And I thought it was a really sneaky way of doing a podcast that featured really well-known metal musicians, rock musicians, people that work in the metal world, and had them talk about their first ever compilation or mixtape back in the day, when we used to dub cassettes and all that sort of stuff, and just get into heavy music. And
they were good days.
Yeah, and so it was a nod to the old school, and there's a song on the album called Nod to the Old School. So I picked 10 people, and I made sure that the people represented, in a way, each of the songs off our album. So, for instance, I had Andy LaRock from King Diamond. So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, if I get an Andy LaRock fan that tunes in who doesn't know who I am, but they have to listen to a 30-second grab of the first song off our album, they've got to listen to that first. Hopefully they don't fast forward, but you're thinking that they'll listen to the whole thing. They listen to that first and then get into the interview, and they go, oh wow, these guys sound all right. So I did that with everybody. That's a
great idea.
I had Johnny D from Doro, and Dave Ellison from Megadeth, Britney Slaves from Unleash the Archers, and just a whole bunch of these great artists who sort of have brought in all these people. But I sort of went off on a tangent, as you do with podcasting, but with the artwork side of things, I thought I needed this point of difference that would encourage the guests themselves to share it, where they go, "Oh, this is cool! Look at me in this like caricature sort of artwork." Because I needed them to push the podcast as well as just myself, and then obviously bring in people when they see the artwork and go, "Hey, this looks cool. I'll listen to it." And I think it worked. I think it did really well, and I don't think it would have gone as well if I didn't have that artwork. So I had a guy from Melbourne called Tristan Tate who did the artwork for Nod to the Old School, and then when that went really well, I just said, "Hey, Tristan, can you do a revamp of Antisocial? Can you give me some new artwork?" He's like, and I said, "Oh, here's this rough idea, blah, 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 blah." And, a couple of days later, he gave me this mock-up draft and I went, "Oh, geez, you've almost done it. Like, it's almost there. Just polish it up and we're good to go." So,
is that the one with the headset and the feet kicked back?
Yeah,
that's a great
I've got
picture.
my little Larry cockatiel pet next to me, and I've got a basketball, and I've got all this stuff in the background. There's a few like little Easter eggs in the background that are from previous episodes. So people who've been listening for a long time will probably pick out a couple of things in the background. But I just realized that even though my podcast is audio, it's still got to attract people in the first place, and it's just like putting out an album. You got to make sure your artwork is shit hot. Otherwise, if you're in a record store or you're online, you're searching through different albums to listen to. I mean, you want to be grabbed in by art. You have to judge a book by its cover to an extent.
Yeah, well, that's what I heard a comedian once say. They go, "Of course they judge the book by its cover. That's why books have covers."
That's it. Well, you got to start somewhere.
You do, yeah, absolutely.
And you can definitely have your word of mouth. You can have your mate that recommends something, says, "Look, you got to listen to this, blah blah," and that could be the influence to get someone to listen to something or check something out. But man, like, there's just so much stuff out there. You got to grab them, and the visual part's the first thing, and then you capture them with the audio experience.
Yeah,
after
that thumb is the first thing they see, and the good thing about doing that is that it's cross-platform. You can put it everywhere.
Yep.
Once you've got it built, you can just you're basically cutting and pasting it across all of your your websites, your social media interactions.
Yep.
The whole lot. But that's a great recommendation for anyone getting into it. You've got to look at your artwork. You've got to look at your visual presentation.
Yep.
Especially, and I think the main point there as well is to get your guests to push the content. I find that's the hardest thing about podcasting, man.
It's tough.
Is getting the guests to push their content, because you'll get like a range of different personalities. And, we'll all be on that spectrum of introvert to extrovert in whatever field of endeavor it is. But when people see themselves on screen, and especially listening to themselves talk, half of the people will go, "Oh, I can't believe that's me." So they have that, especially if they might only do 1 or 2 interviews a year. Yeah. If they're in that sort of spectrum, the guys that are like, media whores, they would like just plaster it everywhere for you. And I love you guys. Big shout out. But sometimes it's hard to get the guest to go, "Man, no, this is really good. You've done a really good job." And some people get a bit self-conscious, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I've learnt over the years is that sometimes I wouldn't. So I do the episode, record it, release it, and I make sure they're tagged and they're referenced and all that. But I'd be a little bit reluctant to send them like a message and give them the links, because I feel like I'm pushing them to do my work for them. But luckily, I've learned a while back that I always do a follow-up email or a follow-up message, even for somebody I don't normally talk to anyway. It's just a one-off sort of having the podcast and that's it. And I'll just recap and just say, "Hey, thanks once again, blah, blah, blah. Here's all the links. Here's the main link." And I'll give recommendations, say, "This is the best link to post if you're going to post anything. Here's the photo or the image and whatever it might be." And yeah, sometimes you don't get a peep out of them. Yeah. Sometimes you get nothing, and look, you can only do what you can do. Yeah. But sometimes that combination of sending the email, tagging them online, and getting a little bit of buzz from your own listenership, your own audience, can be enough to sort of sway people to go, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll press share, or I'll post it somewhere else." And then as soon as they do that, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah, no, the tags and shares, that's what you want, because they will just gains momentum immediately as soon as they do that, because they've got their own audience. Like generally saying, like most people have 1,000 friends on Facebook.
Yeah, and these days that's crazy,
right? They'll just have 1,000 friends just out there, bang. Yep. If 2 of those friends share it, go, "Oh, check it out, mate." Yep. You've just reached 3,000 people. Yep. Right? They might not all, of course, they haven't all watched it or listened to it, but they're there. And when they don't post it, you're like, "Oh man, I've just done all this work for you, promoting your movie and promoting your band." And the promotion part works when you also promote it. Yeah. So I find that a bit of a challenge, but I think it's a personality thing. It's about people. They'll watch it for themselves and they'll go, "Oh," they look at themselves and go, "Oh, I'm terrible. I can't give this to people. They'll judge me." Yeah, yeah. So they have this guise where they want to promote it. They want to have this conversation. But me, in the podcast game, I am totally selfish. I do this because I learn off people. I get to talk to interesting people once a week.
Yep.
And I get to have a beer and learn something.
Yeah, speaking of which.
Yeah, cheers, man. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, welcome to the Pagey Train.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Look, I mean, I'm the same. You know, I can't remember if I said this last time we caught up, but I started the podcast because I love talking to people. I rattle my mouth off all the time, and I thought, well, why not record it? Let's try and make it semi-productive. And it's a perfect tool to meet people and network and build this like portfolio of great people that you can lean on when or if the occasion arrives. And it's such a great thing for me over the years to be able to interact with people I would never speak to if I didn't have a microphone, an excuse. Like, I couldn't just hit up, I'm just trying to think of somebody, like I had an astrophysicist on the podcast a couple of years ago. I wouldn't be able to just email that person and say, hey, I'm going to be in Brisbane. Would you just meet up for a coffee so I can just talk your ear off and you can just tell me how, dark matter works?
Yeah,
and they'd be like, oh, look, I'm kind of busy. I don't really know who you are.
Yeah, you're weirding me out, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know you.
Yeah, but I'm like, hey, this is me. I've got a podcast. This is what it looks like. This is how long it's going to take. This is what we, blah, blah, blah. Here's some references, different.
That's what it comes
episodes.
down to, those references, yeah.
Yeah, and then they go, okay, cool, because they can see some value in it. There's some purpose behind it, and then you build a connection, and then you're off to the races after that, and it's just it's incredible. So yeah, it's not same deals, just super selfish, and over time I've realised that it's become more than that, and a lot of people get a lot of value out of listening to it. And so now I am thinking of my own interests when I'm picking people to be on the podcast, but I'm also thinking about what I'm getting an idea of the average listener, what they're like, and I'm thinking, okay, would that person actually like this person, or would they be absolutely stunned and go, oh my god, I can't believe you got that person on the podcast? I'm trying to get that feeling, that sort of
that
spark.
buzz.
Yeah. So yeah, it's evolved, but yeah, same as you, man. I totally relate.
Oh man, there was one guest that you had that I was totally envious of, man. Because I've been following this guy before he did his cooking show, and that is
that's what I reckon.
That's what you reckon. Because I was following, because he was doing like tours like at boat shows.
Yeah.
And it was back when he had like 1,000 views on a clip.
Yep.
And now he's like millions of views.
It's crazy.
Anything he touches is 1 million views at the moment. And I remember following that guy, and even my missus would pull me up and goes, what are you watching this guy for? I'm like, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's awesome. She's like, yeah, but that's so Westy. I'm like, well, I'm pretty Westy, man. So that's why I like this content. And then she shows me like about a year later. She goes, look at this cooking show. I'm like, do you know who that is?
It's the same guy.
It's the same guy.
Same guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I listened to that podcast. I'm like, oh man, I'd love to get him as a guest.
But I mean, like for him, like he's probably the only person, or maybe there's two people that have been on the podcast 3 times, and so I hit him up like around that time where he was doing the boat show videos and things like that. And I don't know if we had a mutual friend on Facebook or something like that, but I just hit him up out of the blue and just said, hey, if you're ever keen, like, love to do a podcast. He's like, all right, hey, cool, yeah, whatever. And so we went into Newtown and we sat at a pub and just talked shit for an hour, and that was good, and we did it. And then it was sort of like a year later, and I said, hey, do you want to do an anniversary episode? We'll just do 12 months later. So, yeah, all right. So I went to his place, and we did a podcast there. And then just a few months ago, we did the third one, but it was sort of during all the COVID stuff. So so we did it over Facebook and Facebook call, whatever it was, and a little bit different, a bit sort of weirder, like we were talking about before, where you got that distancing, not in person.
You don't have those body reactions and those facial expressions. Yeah,
it was a little bit odd, but still fun. But it all came down to just like I just found his page and I just shot a message through, and I was just lucky he responded, and it was cool. And we kind of had enough sort of people that we sort of half knew and a few connections there. We were sort of like, he's not completely random. There's a link here. But some of the best people I've ever had was just a case of let's just throw down the gauntlet, just give it a go. Like find an email address, or I'll be on Twitter and I'll just flick a private message and say, hey, would you be keen? And they're like, oh yeah, right, maybe. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe they've responded. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of like asking someone on a date.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's like, don't reject me.
Don't reject me. Come on the show. You'll have fun.
Yeah.
You'll have fun. Yeah. No, that was a really he's a really cool dude. They were really good episodes, man.
Cheers.
But man, like 250 podcasts.
Yeah.
So that's that's 50 a year.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
It's 50 shows a year, man.
Yeah. It's it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Like I was saying before, a lot of talking.
Yeah, that's a lot. How many? Like that's because your podcast goes for an hour and a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, most of them on average about an hour. Between an hour and an hour and a half, depending on the guest. I've had some of the earlier ones that sort of went to sort of the 3 hour mark where I had a mate time. We just like have a few too many beers and we just kept waffling on. It's like, oh, geez. But yeah, most of them now I try to keep between 45 and an hour. I think it's sort of the sweet spot for most of them. Yeah, so it seems to do the job. But it's a lot of talking.
Yeah, well, my return guests I usually do about 45.
Yep.
And the new guest, I'll go up to an hour 20.
Yeah, cool.
Because I reckon that's the same. Yeah, that's the sweet spot. Because people will do that long form content. Unless you've got, if you're doing an interview with like a massive star, yeah, you want to, you do it for 3 hours, right? But if you're just getting to the nuts and bolts of something, I think an hour you get through the nuts and bolts. But I always have that feeling at the end of it, man. Every podcast I have the same feeling, man. I could do this for another hour. We can keep going. But then I just say to those guys when that emotion happens, I go, man, just come back on the show. I'll get you back on.
Yeah, Yeah, I've had a few where I've had a great conversation. It's just flowing, and you can't even find that opportunity just to sort of go, okay, well, let's wrap it up or anything like that. So. I'll just go, hey man, you cool to do another hour? And like, yeah, I'll just crack another beer, all right, no worries. And then I'll just turn around and say, look, I'll just chop it in half. Instead of just dumping it all in one episode, I'll just split into two. And
that's pretty cool.
So I did that earlier this year with a mate of mine from Adelaide, Ryan Quarrington. He plays in a band called Shatterbrain, and he's also I'm going to get this wrong, but he's a research fellow at Adelaide University, and he does a lot of stuff with regards to spines and cadavers. And basically he shatters spines to learn how spines dislocate so they can create other things to protect people in cars and things like that.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. So they do like reactions to spines to see, well, how can we stop that reaction and stop spinal injury?
Yeah.
Or mitigate
it.
Yeah,
and so they literally buy torsos. Yeah. Bodies that have been donated to science, and he's taking out the spine and they put them through these different mechanisms to shatter them. So anyway, we went from talking about thrash metal to then talking about his profession, his career. And so I'm like, I'm just going to drive a stake right down the middle of this and just say part 1, part 2, and I put about 5 or 6 weeks in between. So I let people sort of hang and go, okay, well, I said part 2 will be in a few weeks' time. And so eventually when part 2 came out, then people were like, oh, yeah, cool.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So, and it saved me having to sort of go, all right, stop. All right, we'll catch up in a few weeks and we'll have part 2. I just thought, we're on a roll. It's flowing. The beers are going down really well. Let's keep talking. So yeah.
Sometimes you don't want to break that flow, but doing video though, you get restricted. So I'm restricted by the data.
That's right, definitely.
But I'm upgrading the system soon, so I'll be able to bust out the 3 hours if I have to.
Yeah, right. Wow.
But I'm a bit scared of that because I'm upgrading so I can go live to YouTube.
Yeah, cool, nice.
And just do it live to YouTube and have a switcher.
Yep.
And just do it live. Live.
I like it.
Yeah, terrifying.
Cool.
So I want to go through that terrifying experience, But man, just to do a subject change, bassist from Lord. So man, just for my audience, how long have you been in Lord?
Yeah. So end of 2005, I joined the band. So 15 odd years. And the long short of it is the band used to be called Dungeon back in the day. Dungeon's been around since 1989. Tim is our front guy, singer, guitarist, and he's sort of been the mainstay. It's his baby. And towards the end of 2005, Dungeon sort of split up in a sense. Most of the band members sort of parted ways, or at least split down the middle. And Tim sort of decided, well, let's change the name of the band. Dungeon had a bit of stigma around sort of how it was perceived and the type of music was played and they were playing, and he thought, well, let's change the name and I can then sort of branch out and do a few different other styles, keep it still metal, but add a few other elements and change the perception around the band. So same band for the most part, just a different name. And it's been a wild 15 years. And
it's a long time to be in a band, man.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit unusual for, I think, a lot of Aussie musicians. I think not everyone...
Oh, man, you're a fucking stayer. 15 years. Shit, man. You guys must be like... Because imagine all the, the ups and downs over 15 years of doing music in Sydney.
Yeah, tough.
That's an ice skate uphill.
Yeah,
that's tough.
It's one of those things, and I've always joked about being in a band. It's sort of like having multiple girlfriends without the sex, because really it's constant compromise. There's bickering, there's fighting, there's laughter, there's tears. There's bro hugs. There's just everything that, almost fisticuffs at times, depending on what's going on. And you somehow just manage to keep it together. You manage just to keep it afloat. And we're we've got a weird dynamic in our band. We live about an hour and a half distance from each other. So we're all in sort of this triangle, the three of us. And we don't really hang out that much. No, Mark guitarist, I mean, he's my best man at my wedding, and we're great mates, but I think I've seen him once this year, and probably COVID stuff anyway, but we interact differently, and it's just, and the band just functions remotely, and we just make it happen, and it's just what it is.
It's strange how that happens, though, because, the group of guys I play with, right, we've known each other for decades, some of us.
Yep.
And we used to hang out all the time.
Yeah.
But now that we've been in a band, I think we're up to, 7 years or something like that, which is another, 7 years is a massive feat to stay in a band.
Huge.
It's huge. Yeah. The amount of arguments that have happened in that time, they could have split the band, but no, they didn't. And we actually formed out of the ashes of the previous band that split up because of an argument, right?
Yeah, right.
And, we were playing in that band for 3 years, which is another good run.
Yep.
3 years is
huge. It's massive.
3 years is a massive run for a band in Sydney. And, you get to play all the cool venues and start getting those bigger audience sizes, and then it all falls over, and then you start all over again. That's usually the process. So 15 years, holy shit, man.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helped us is that especially when I joined the band and we sort of went through that change from Dungeon to Lord, we sort of had a lot of conversation around what we wanted to do and the purpose and the direction we were going for the podcast. I mean, sorry, for the podcast, for the band.
The band.
I saw you adjusting your mic and I'm like, oh, that's right, podcast. We're doing a podcast.
We're on a podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I think we were all sort of not necessarily exactly on the same pages, but we were somewhat on the same page as far as we wanted to do this. We wanted to make it serious, and we wanted to really throw everything we could into it. And I think one thing that hurts a lot of musicians is that you've got this different mixture of commitment in the band. You've got the guy who lives and breathes the band, he does everything, and then you got another guy who is really good at playing guitar or drums or whatever.
It's funny that you said guitar first, because I think I see a pattern here. I'm resonating exactly what you're saying here.
And that maybe they've also got a career, or they've got a wife, they've got kids or whatever it is. So their priorities and the way that they invest their time, even mentally, is split. So then you've got to compromise that, and the more compromises that you have to make, then the harder it is to maintain your band on the long term. So I think for us, we were really lucky for at least 10 years where we were just 100% in, whatever it took, and we would sacrifice a lot. Relationships, jobs, whatever it was. We just knew that we only had windows of time to make it happen, and so we just did it. And a little bit reckless at times, but I don't regret any of the decisions that we made. And I think in the last probably 5 years, I think we've all started to turn into adults, and we started to have the adult commitments, whether it be, careers or kids or marriages or whatever it might be, mortgages, and we've managed to sort of just keep it still afloat and keep things cool between everybody. But it's a different dynamic to what it used to be, and I think for us it's just a case of understanding that, accepting it, and allowing the band to evolve into a different state now. We're not the band we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago plus. It's just and it's cool. We're still happy, and we still put music out.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that, man. I really do. Just the people getting married, having kids, changes people's focus, and that's what it is. There's always one guy that's doing everything, and then that guy will crack the shits. Usually it's me. It's cracking the shits. I ain't doing it anymore. Someone else do it.
Yeah.
And then someone goes, well, if you don't fill that void, then the void starts getting bigger and bigger. Then someone goes, well, I'll fill that void. Otherwise the band's going to fall apart. And you're thank God someone else is doing it, because I've chucked the wobbly. And then I think things that help, though, is having, for us, it's having a rehearsal space.
Yep.
We have our lair. We have a place where we hang out.
That's huge, yeah.
And having a place where we don't have to break down and set up our gear all the time.
Yep.
We just, roll a door up
in
an industrial complex, and away we go.
Yeah, perfect.
And we can do that any hour of the day, right? But the only problem is finding that hour of the day to make sure you can get 5 blokes into a room. But the online aspect, I must say, COVID has changed our writing in an immense way.
Yep.
We've written more content during COVID than we have in the last 2 years.
Yeah, perfect. That's cool.
Which is a blessing.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. It still needs to be honed in, of course, because it's such a rapid prolific succession of music there. We need to go through that and arrange all of that.
Yeah.
Which I find, well, for me, just to sidetrack again, I find that the most exciting part, by the way, is, you have a guitarist that lays down a guitar track, and then everyone else will start populating around it.
Yeah.
And then I get to populate my parts in it as a vocalist. And once we start doing that arrangement, it starts formulating into a story. That's where it gets the hairs.
You can see it building.
Yeah, that's where I get excited when I see that formulate and solidify. Oh man, this is sounding good. And when you're either on a root note or off a root note, however it's building, whether you're in syncopation or not, I love that part is the most exciting for me.
Yeah, I think for us, we've been really lucky that right from day dot, we were never a band that would sort of jam out in a rehearsal space. Like we would go to a rehearsal space to rehearse for an upcoming run of shows or something like that. So we would only have sort of a very sort of short space of time that we would get together. And I know a lot of bands would just go every week, and then they would start to jam out riffs and work out arrangements and do it all together. And I kind of like it. I mean, I like the idea of it, but we never worked like that. So every once in a while, we'd be like mucking around on guitars and whatever, and we'd go, hey, that's a cool riff, remember that? And it's like, oh, okay, no worries. And so they'd be like, okay, all right. Or you get your phone out or whatever and try and quickly record the riff for later. But we were always about recording stuff at home. We would all have like riff boxes, so it'd just basically be just random riffs recorded and just chucked into folders, and then we just had them all there. And then when we got to a point where we're like, yeah, okay, we're going to start writing an album, it'd be a case of getting a Dropbox folder and just dumping everything in there, uploading it all. And Tim was always sort of the last sort of arranger of a lot of the stuff, unless somebody had 3/4 or most of a song mapped out. We would just be throwing lyric content, we'd be throwing riffs in there, different lead ideas, different melodies. We would have the most ridiculous stuff in there. There would be like dictaphone stuff of going like just like whatever it might be, just something that might spark an idea. And then Tim would just go through it all and just start trawling through and go, hey, that's cool, or that sounds like shit, but it's given me a great idea for something else, and it becomes this amazing song. So during this time, it's sort of I'm watching a lot of other bands becoming what we've been doing for quite some time.
Yeah, and that's what's happening to us now.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like I think it's really exciting, and I think eventually when people are allowed to sort of go back to some normalcy, then I think then they'll sort of appreciate both sides of it. Like, okay, we can get together, we can create together, but we can also sort of go away and not stop ourselves in that creative process. We can keep it going at home or wherever.
Well, that's what we call it, doing your homework.
Yeah.
You got to do your homework. If you want to be in a band, you got to do your homework.
Yeah.
And when someone doesn't do the homework, and then someone else would, for me, I'm supposed to upload 3 riffs this week, right? Because I've got the riffs from practice.
Yep.
That came from, the back end of homework before. And other guys weren't doing their homework. I'm like, well, I haven't uploaded it yet. Because I'm like, fuck you, But then, I've got to get over, sometimes you've got to get over those childish tendencies, man. Because it's such a sibling thing. It's like, look, you nailed it before. My partner, she refers to it as my other girlfriend. Go see your other girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
Which was really, when I started dating my wife, right, I said to her, don't ever get in the way of the band.
Yeah.
You won't win. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to stick around, you're going to have to realise that my time is dedicated to other things. And, slowly but surely, I had to admit to her at one point, like, no, you're number one, but just understand that band is number 2.
There's different, like, you can have more than one number one. I think it's just, they're different types of number ones. I mean, I went through the same thing with my wife as well. It's a case of just understanding that it's a kind of a weird sort of dynamic that you have where, you've gone from, this real sort of over-investment of time and energy and money and everything to basically become this thing that is not the traditional path that most people take when they finish school or whatever it might be. And so mentally and emotionally you invest so much into it, and then someone comes along and they think, well, I'm gonna just take their world away, like in a positive way, and sort of, and they will be my everything and back and forth. And so there was a bit of tension there to begin with, because it's like, well, I've got to go and play some shows, and it'd be like, well, but hang on, you're doing that a lot. I'm like, yeah, I've always done that. And so, and then eventually we sort of understood each other, and I had to make some compromises as well, as you do. And, it goes both ways. But, it takes some time. But it's a weird dynamic, I think, for guys that play in bands, guys or gals, it's a weird environment. I don't think most people get to have that environment or get those feelings of just, you know, putting so much into something that's sort of outside of the norm.
I think as well, though, she refers to it as my girlfriend because of the emotional context.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll come home and you slam the door and like, that's it, I fucking quit. Fucking quitting. I've had enough of this shit. And then, next day you're like, all right, so I'll upload these riffs.
Yeah, it's like give him space, give him a few hours, he'll be over it. He'll be back to normal.
Yeah. No, but it's so like I just can't picture me doing anything else though.
That's cool.
I just without having a microphone, I don't know how I would be.
Yeah.
It's so therapeutic to me.
Yeah.
I have so much going on up here. I need to have multiple outlets, and that's one of them.
Yep.
I think it's always involved a microphone for me though. Because I do voiceover work as well, and obviously now podcasting. It's always been a microphone involved in what I'm doing. So I don't know if there's something in that. I don't know if any of you guys are like doing psychology. Just let me know. Put it in the comments. What's going on with me? But yeah, look, just to promote your album at the moment. So Fallen Idols
Thanks,
from Lord. Thank you for the gift, by the way.
Oh, dude, my pleasure.
My next drive to work, I'll have this done.
Do you still have a CD player in your car?
I do.
I do. Love it.
You need a CD player. Well, that's the thing, because we did our EP last year, right? And you do the artwork, and then people go, well, I'm just going to listen to it on Spotify or Amazon, whatever. And you put it out there, and you get your listeners, and that all happens. But there's nothing like going to a gig and selling the physical thing.
Yeah.
Because I see it as a collectible. Like when I go to gigs, I buy their album.
It's a little souvenir. You know?
Yeah.
It's like when you go traveling and you end up in the souvenir shop and you go and buy something, it's a little relic to remind you of the experience. And I think that's what CDs are now to an extent. I mean, we're just lucky, being sort of a metal band, that metal fans still love vinyl, they love CDs, they love the tangible stuff, unlike probably some of the other genres out there. And for us, we'd be silly to just do something digital only. And when you're playing shows, of course you have t-shirts and other stuff, but you just got to have some CDs there. And we might not press as much as we used to in the past because it's just changed. But that last album that we put out last year sold more than any other Lord album over the past 15 odd years.
Wow.
So as the trends have changed where people are buying less CDs, we're actually selling more.
Isn't that weird?
Which is cool. And
it's weird though.
Yeah, it's weird. But I think what we've done is we've understood who our typical Lord fan is, and they're older guys. They're mostly guys. Like as much as I'd love to have more women listening to Lord, I'm going to be just real with myself and just go. They're just a bunch of blokes. They love Iron Maiden. They love Queensryche. They love Halloween. All this sort of stuff. But they're all guys who are passionate about music. They love metal. They've all got music collections. They love collecting stuff, and so we lean heavy into that. So when we put stuff out, we put it out limited edition. We hand number stuff. We always make sure there's versions of things as well, so people can collect stuff. And we make sure the artwork, make sure it all looks good. And like our audience, our supporters, our fans, like they love it. They lap it up. So I think we've lent more and more into that over the years, and I think that's probably why, for us anyway, we're unique where we're selling more than we have in the past. So it's cool. It's good.
Yeah, I think that's some good advice, is to lean into that, because I find it because like I do like event shows as a as a promoter and as a cameraman producer, and some stuff I do is car shows, and a car audience are very nuanced like that as well. When I started, because I interview everyone, right? So when you interview a car racing driver versus interviewing a musician, I realised, man, they're very, very similar.
I'm not surprised.
The audience is very similar.
Yep.
Like, a petrol head is very similar to a metal head.
Yep.
Like, they're different genres, different things, but their ethos and the way that they go about being a fan is very similar.
Well, if you think about a lot of those vintage car shows where they've got these beautiful cars from the past several decades, and they're all sort of lined up, beautifully polished. The bonnets are up, the engines are humming, and everything like that. And you can have someone walk past and go, yeah, but they're fuel guzzlers, they're loud as all hell, they're not comfortable, there's no shocks or anything like that. No, the suspension's shit. Why don't you get a Tesla? Because Tesla's like, cheap, it's, electricity, blah, 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 the state-of-the-art technology, et cetera, et cetera. And they could be right. Absolutely. I mean, if you're marrying them up, depending on the purpose of just using a car, then maybe a Tesla's awesome. But there's nothing like, that history, that story, that the character with some of these old cars. And it's the same with music, man. Like, there's nothing like going to a record store and finding a used record store and finding an old vinyl sitting there for an old Dio or Black Sabbath record and going,
fuck yeah.
cool, pulling this out, or even CDs now. I mean, we're all getting on in age, so CDs are becoming this relic. And so I think there's that nostalgic sort of attraction to it. I think people love it, and they can love it and they can still stream, and I think it just depends on the time of the day and the purpose, and I think you can have both. They can coexist.
Yeah,
So,
I just think it's weird. I go to a show and I buy the CD, but I'll listen to it on Spotify.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm the same. I'll buy something, and if it's not on Spotify, I'll rip it to the computer, and then I'll put into my sort of playlist, and it's just MP3s, and then I'll find that I'm listening to it on the run, and my CD just neatly goes into the shelf, and it's nice, and it's catalogued, and looks all beautiful, and I go, yeah, good.
Although, no, I do it in the car, though. I usually do it on the ride home.
Yep.
We'll put the CD that we bought in the car.
Yep.
And listen to the
That's a nice way to end the night, I reckon.
Yeah.
It's
Listen,
cool.
all right, so that's how they played. Let's see how they record.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Let's see how they produce this shit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love doing that sort of thing, man. But look, you do... you had another podcast going as well, the Self-Starter.
Hey, you've done your research.
I have done my research. So what's the Self-Starter all about, man?
Yeah, well, what we did... oh, geez, what's this? Going back a couple of years now, I was living down the South Coast, and we bought a house down there and sort of working remotely down there and coming up to Sydney. And I sort of grew up, sort of trying to give some context here and some backstory. I grew up in Queensland and sort of lived in a lot of regional, rural places, and so I found a real connection with the South Coast. But one thing I found straight away is you get the old newspaper every week, come in your letterbox, and they're always talking about unemployment. And nobody's got a job. There's no opportunities, and now automation's kicking in, so factories are shutting down. There's less jobs, blah blah blah. And I'm just looking around, going, man, there is so many things now that people can be doing. We've got a strong internet connection. Hook up a laptop and start selling stuff online. Go and mow someone's lawn. There's just so many things. And I thought, why can't I create a podcast based in the South Coast to start talking about people who are actually making their own business, not relying on getting employed, like just finding something and then providing a service and making money from it.
Well, they say you either get a job or you create a job.
Yeah, that's it. And I think yeah, sometimes the job opportunities are quite limited, but I think there's always a way to make money. So that was sort of the basis behind Self-Starter, and it was just a bit of a project for me, a bit of a passion project, and sort of manifested, and I did end up doing 2 seasons, and the second season branched out and had people from all over the country just talking about their own businesses, freelancing, being just self-employed, whatever it might be, and lots of different industries, different stories, different people. And it was cool. It was really good. It was like my professional podcast in a way, because it was a little bit more slick, a little bit more sort of clinical with the way that I put it together. And I got nominated for like a host of the year for Australian Podcast Awards, and just started getting a lot of recognition for that. And I'm like, this is great. But like, Andy Social's my baby over here. I'm like, oh, this is great. So
it's usually the case, though, dude.
It's the one that you don't expect, and that's what gets the attention. But it was good. It was fantastic, and I actually put a pause on it the end of last year. And I'm going to bring it back because I've actually had people asking about it. So it's just...
I can see why.
Yeah.
I can see why the people ask about it.
And probably more so now. I think with people being, out of work or, being restricted in what they can do.
And as well, if you go through a business chamber of commerce, they'd love that.
Yep.
They would love that podcast, man. That's probably why they got that nomination, man.
Yep.
Because they've gone, well, here's a guy that's reaching into the community and then perhaps inspiring people to create employment. Yep. And obviously the government loves that. But I think from, government aside, not that I'm a government fan, but I think, Chamber of Commerce kind of people, they're sort of like corporate-backed kind of people. Yeah. And they're interested in how do we improve things to make them better. They seem to be... I know, not to be again on siding with corporate versus government. I don't want to get into that kind of a conversation, but just in when I've been doing fundraising or sponsorship, selling advertising space, whatever it is, when I deal with corporate, they are the best. That's usually the contract is one page. It's very clear. That's what you do. This is what we do. Every time I work with government, it is a 16-page document to produce 1 minute of content. And it's just like, it is insane what you have to go through. And usually government, I hate to say this, guys, if you're listening, but because I know I'm going for funding with you all the time, but usually they want 3 times the amount of work for half the price.
Of course.
They're just how they operate. They don't usually have an understanding of industry. Corporate have a very strong understanding, and they know that time is money. They understand that, and they can see the value in. I've been a bit about. You would hear a couple of years back. People trying to activate spaces. Let's activate spaces. Let's turn this into an old cinema, or let's turn this into a music venue, or let's make this into an art gallery. Let's do some street art down this alleyway. It's all about activating spaces. What I've noticed the shift in now is a bit of a activation of people. Let's activate some people, because you need people power to do it. And just like being in a band, man, there's no such thing as a one-man band. You need a collaboration, and that's the same. Even in this podcast, man, like I'm the center of it, but I can't do it without help. You need a guest. that's one part of it, but the other part of it, and that comes from a community sense, right? So you're throwing these things out there, and anyone who wants to be on your show is community minded in some way. They would need to promote something in some way, and whether they post it or not, I recommend you do. No hard feelings. I mean it. No, but man, I've lost my train of thought. I've got too deep into my own shit there.
But I think, one of the things that's been really positive about it is that it is very community, and that was always a common theme within all the guests that I had on Self Starter, and I think that's what gave it traction. As you said before, I think sort of that sort of topic, and it's creating value for people, and I think people. It's more easy to relate to those sort of topics because everybody needs money.
And that's what I mean.
Everybody needs to be employed, whether they create it themselves or they wait for somebody, they apply for it. Yeah. And so, so that's why it sort of works so well. And I think even just talking about it now, it's sort of like in the back of my mind going, okay, all right.
Yeah, you should be.
Kick back into it.
That's what I'm saying to you, man, because by doing that, right, you are activating people.
Yeah.
And activating people is more powerful than activating space. So don't get me wrong, you need to activate spaces and don't let things rot away.
Well, you need people to actually activate the space.
But you need that's the horse before the cart is the people. You can't activate spaces without activating people. And I think a podcast like that is something that activates people because it gets them thinking about, how else can I turn a buck? Because I'm someone who's I've always got a side hustle. I don't like. Either I'm working full time or I'm working contract to contract. But in between all of that, I'm always working on how can I sell this thing and make people benefit from it. You got to, if you have a product, you got to have a good product. It's got to have quality to it. I'd rather have something of quality that sells at a lesser volume at a higher price than something that's a shit quality that sells at a low price at a high volume. If that makes sense.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, you're way late. You're 55 minutes in for that one. The record's 8 seconds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When they do the old fuck. Oh, shit, I bumped it.
Hey, this is the professional podcaster here, just like smashing mics.
Smashing the mics. Don't worry, I've spilt beer all over this desk during the podcast. It didn't go to air.
It's been christened. Yeah, there you go.
I didn't put it to air. We were way too drunk. Way too drunk for that. But so if people want to check you out, Andy, where do they go?
Man, I've got a really wanky website, andydowling.net. So that's my portal.
That's the portal website.
Yeah, so it's got our band Lloyd, it's got Andy Social, it's got Self Starter, it's got Nord to the Old School, it's got my social media links, it's got my Patreon that's linked to Andy Social. There's all this stuff in there that people can check out, and this is all happening. Bam, bam, bam. I'm getting excited, just plugging myself. But man, it's I'm really active on the internet. Probably a little bit too much for my own liking, but it's all hustle, as you said. It's just get out there and keep creating stuff and keep connecting with people, and it's fun.
Oh man, I think you've got a good portal. I think your websites are really nice, man.
Yeah, well, thanks, man.
You've put them together. I was interested in how to do the .nets though, because I'm a .com.au.
Yep.
And you've got to pay a bit of money to do that. Is it cheaper doing the .net?
Yeah.
Or is it the same?
No, it might be a little bit cheaper to do .net. I think it just depends on some of them. What happens is here's me trying to talk like I know what I'm talking about. What I think happens.
Sorry, I do that all the time.
What I think is happening is people are just buying domains straight out, and they're just holding them, not using them for anything.
They do that, yeah.
And so then they just jack the price up. So then eventually, when you look and go, oh well, I want andydowling.com or .com.au, then it's like, oh yeah, someone owns that, and they're going to charge you X amount or whatever. It's like, oh well, I'll just go for the .net.
Oh man, they're fucking dodgy, man. I have emails all the time going because obviously Made in the West, film festival.
Yeah.
They go, well, we've got Made in the West, with a different domain name, and we're like, but we already own the .com.au, man. We don't
You don't
care.
need the other ones, yeah.
We don't need the other ones, but they'll always go, yeah, we've got it, and they'll let you know. And here's the other thing. The other thing that really blew me away is because you register your business name, right?
Yep.
We have people that try and register our business names. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, we're in a posture now where we're registering names that are similar in case we want them.
Yeah.
Just to keep the fleas off, man.
Yeah.
It's terrible that you have to do that because it's not a big expense, but it's an expense.
That's it. It's just
terrible.
It's just those extra things that you got to think about as well. Just but what you do what you need to do.
Yeah. And the other thing, we back up our data now. Like we used to back it up before, but now we fucking back it up.
Yeah.
It is backed up. Like house burns down, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like we've got our data.
That's your recovery process. It's just like crisis.
Yeah. Plane hits the house, man. I've still got the festival,
Yep.
I've even got because of the bushfires, right? Now I'm fucking digressing now. Because of the bushfires, we set up a grab pack, and I basically just set up a hard drive with all of the IP on it.
Yep.
All of the IP just sitting there in case we had to go. I'm like, yep, everything's burnt down, but I've still got the IP in my hand.
Man, it's scary to have to even think about it, but
It's a terrible thought.
The positive side of it is that, well, you are thinking about it, because it's always, I'm always about thinking about worst case scenario and what would you do. And I think it takes so much anxiety and stress out of your life it could be the craziest, like the most extreme scenario, the worst possible thing that could happen in the world. And if you've got a game plan, it still doesn't mean that everything's going to be okay, but if you've got a game plan, it just takes that edge off just a little bit, and you go, no matter what happens, I know what the next steps are going to be. Even if I don't know what step 10 is going to be, at least I know what step 1, 2, and 3 are going to be. And it just takes a little bit of the edge off. So I think even that, just knowing that, it might not be bushfires, but it might be something else. And you've got an idea, you won't be scrambling as much as you would if you never thought about it. So I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, you don't want someone to put your lights out, man.
No.
You got to stay awake.
Yep.
And that's what I think that ties into that being persistent. You just got to keep doing it.
Yep.
Because don't get me wrong, guys. If you're out there wanting to start a podcast, the first 20 will be a fucking hoot. Once you start to get to 25, 30. You'll be like, oh man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Like it's at least 3 hours a week for me. At least. That's just the material handling of it, the shooting of it, the editing of it, and the promotion of it. Now, I probably haven't even calculated the admin of contacting guests and, all that kind of rigmarole that goes behind it. So
It's worth it though, isn't it?
Oh, fuck yeah, man. I can't not do it. now. I did it for such selfish reasons, but I've realised it's a paradox. I do it because I want to learn. Talking to you tonight about producing music and how to make music and getting it aligned and doing Dropboxing and I'm gonna have a band meeting, right? All over this. You learn from it, but I realise that so do other people.
Yeah.
It's an offering. It's an offering of information that's out there. Because I think there was a time where, especially when I was learning to become an editor, to learn how to edit was really hard because no one wants to give up how to do it. It's a secret art. No one wants to teach you. You have to teach yourself. But doing a few internships for people, interns for myself, where I've turned out a couple of editors. I've turned out a couple of news readers and whatnot. And people go, "You just
It's awesome.
freely give that information out." I go, "Yeah, but what am I going to do with it?
That's it. Yeah.
What do I lose out of making that person win?
That's
Nothing.
it. Nothing.
I don't lose anything out of it.
That's it.
But people of the past, I think the old hat sort of idea is that if I give this information out, you're going to become my competitor. And I just look at it differently. I look at it like the rising tide will rise all boats, man.
Yep.
Share that information.
I'm 100% on your page with that. I think the reason why sort of generationally, in the past where people would be a little bit more sort of protective of their, it's not intellectual property, but just their ideas and their skills and their knowledge, is I think because opportunities were limited. I just don't think that they had as many things that they could sort of paths that they could go down. So
yeah, less plots less footholds.
Yeah, so I think because the windows, the opportunities were less, I think it was just a bit harder for people to sort of freely give up information. Now, anyone can do whatever.
It's out there everywhere.
Well, it's up to the motivation of the individual. It's not about opportunity, limited opportunities. Like there's enough. There's enough to go around. So for me, like if I've got an idea and I know that I'm not gonna execute on that idea, I'll just talk about it because I don't care if it means that my idea can spark somebody else to take action and do something. I mean, that's pretty fulfilling anyway. I'm still getting something out of it. So I'm all about... Oh, there you go. You too.
Hey, I finally did it. It's been 57 episodes. I finally did it. Andy's cracked me.
Love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Absolutely. But yeah, man, I think we've reached the end, Andy.
Cool.
I think we've reached the end. But don't forget to go check out Andy Social Podcast.
Yeah.
The Andy Social Podcast.
Yeah.
You can find him on Patreon.
Yes, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Mm-hmm. Luckily, no one took my name before me, so it's good, nice and easy.
Well, if you, bottomfeeding.com stealers out there, get onto that. Send us a bill, and we won't fucking pay it. Fuck you. Yeah. Yeah, no, they're terrible. But anyway, on that terrible note, you've been I've actually got to do my own plugs. I've got
Go for it.
I've got to do my own plugs.
Please.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Pagey Train if you are watching this, and you can check us out on Spotify. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, and wherever you basically look for podcasts, you can find us. And if you're looking for any Foley work, or if you're looking for any promotional work to do with film, just let us know. And don't forget to subscribe. Once again, I'm just totally rambling right now.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely rambling right off the edge of this cliff. But you've been watching the Pagey Train, and we'll see you next time. Man, I butchered that ending terribly.
That's what podcasting's all about.
That's what it's all about,
That's
baby.
it, man. Cheers, man.
Yeah, cheers. Absolutely, man. I had a good time.
Thanks, mate.